So we have a great team here today to talk about open standards and open technologies in the cloud. I'm going to quickly introduce our panelists. We have Robert Palmer, the Deputy Chief Technology Officer of Department of Homeland Security. Thank you, Robert. Joe Pava, the CIO of ITA, International Trade Administration. And Chad Sheridan, the CIO of the Risk Management Agency of the Department of Agriculture. Thank you all for joining us. So we know that agencies are moving to cloud at different rates and speeds, including yours. And one of the things that has been top of mind is being able to have future-proofing on the decisions we're making today for our systems as they move into the cloud. And an underlying theme for that is open standards, open technologies, and ensuring that as we move to cloud that we're able to move in and out, move across cloud infrastructures, cloud environments, and cloud vendors without friction. And a lot of cloud providers are investing in open standards and open technologies to make sure that we can provide that capability to the government. And so I'm just going to jump right into some of our questions, if you don't mind. And the first question is really about what you see as the benefits of these open standards and open technologies in the efforts that you're undergoing in your agencies with cloud. So Rob, I'll start with you.
Sure, go ahead. Everybody hear me? Yeah, we're good. All right. So really, I'll just piggyback on the comment, the ride the wave, right? It's what we're understanding is that in order to continue to achieve the objectives that the agencies have, we have to be flexible, adaptable, responsive to the new technologies and the mission needs. So one of the things that the more open standards and more open architecture provides us is the ability to set a good foundation, but not be locked into a particular delivery model or particular technologies. So the open standards, the understanding that we are going to have to adapt periodically, which is really speaks to something that I'm sure we'll talk about later, in terms of culturally how we look at how we deliver IT services and the way that we do that. So. What it's bringing, lower barrier to entry, I believe, flexibility, and in some ways, a different security model that we could debate is maybe a little better.
Yeah, so I certainly agree with the better security model. It certainly is much better. I have kind of mixed feelings about this because I'm at heart a big open source guy. And I truly believe that open standards, I mean, I worked on the standards for Expedia and the travel agency, and that was my claim to fame. So I clearly believe in them. I think one of the things we need is much better open standards, more robust open standards. I think we will need open standards to support hybrid clouds like the one I've implemented at the ITA. I think, I'm not putting myself on report because the standards fall under NIST, which is part of commerce, but I do think we need far more robust standards to do more than just move servers, but to actually be able to integrate different types of CSPs. So we want to use as much SaaS as we possibly can, but we also want to use PaaS and IaaS. And I think creating the standards and getting people to implement open standards that allow those things to all work together and to be able to shift from one vendor to the next when someone has a better product or a better offering, I think is absolutely critical.
I'll partially agree. As usual, I don't think I ever agree with anyone. I agree we need better open standards, but part of the problem is we're continuing to talk about IT. And again, we talked about IT scorecards earlier today. When are we going to talk about mission scorecards? When are we going to talk about what our impact to mission? So the benefits of the open standards means that's a good role for government, for one, right, is to talk about standards, not about the solution, not to lock ourselves into individual vendors. But the promise of cloud, the promise of open standards-based cloud is that we stop talking about this IT stuff and we move ourselves to what are the mission outcomes we're trying to drive. I want a scorecard for what we're able to do for our mission, not how many data centers did I consolidate or how much money did I save. Yes, it's important to be smart about how we shepherd the taxpayer dollars so we can put more money into that investment. But what about the outcomes, right? If this is all I'm talking about with my agency leadership, when this latest fetish of federal IT goes away, we're going to be back to mission, and I have nothing to talk about again. So that seat at the table that is hard won goes away unless we can turn the standards talk into mission value.
Absolutely. And so being able to reach across multiple CSPs and grab the new innovation that's developing wherever it may and add that functionality to what the service you're trying to provide to your constituency is critical. And so I guess I'd like to hear more about what you are doing, the initiatives you're doing in your agencies around this, and how you're leveraging the open standards, open technology conversation to further that and to be able to bring that capability forward faster, better.
Back to the top.
Is that okay?
Yeah, that works.
Yeah.
So we've been doing this, I don't know, it's probably, time flies, probably almost 4 years. And what I would say, just to take maybe a quick step back to lay the foundation, is we started small, and I think that's general guidance, and I think it's good guidance. Pick an objective that you have, going back to found or centering it on mission objectives. Start small and do something that you know you can tackle. Get that exercise going. And so we did that with we established an infrastructure as a service, public cloud, and put an open source platform on top of it that we delivered all of our external websites from. And that was a great exercise. Turned out we saved money because we weren't really sure whether we were going to save money at the time. Turns out we did. And we really, the important piece from my perspective is that we transformed the way the team worked, right? Not just, we didn't just buy it. We didn't just contribute to the community. We really transformed the way that the team approached open source. And that's what we really found the value was in that whole exercise. It wasn't just the money savings. It was the ability for the team to understand how to operate in this environment and deliver technologies and capabilities quicker. So outside of that, there's a lot of conversation going on in terms of what's next, as well as on the open standards side, the bigger or the federally focused DHS, NPPD, soon to be, what is it, SIPA, I think. So new to all of us, but so that side, there's a lot of conversations around how do we do threat intelligence sharing, how do we do cyber intelligence sharing in general or broader, and then of course our state and local mission as well. So a lot of conversations centered around information sharing and how do we do that. And of course, to do that in a more real-time fashion, it takes IT, and that gets back to centered on a mission focus. But at some point, the IT has to come to the table to deliver. So that's some of what we're up to.
Okay.
Yeah, I kind of, again, I think I just have a different perspective because I think people in this room, a lot of them have heard me say before, right, that if you're the CIO of a federal agency and you don't have blue badges or weapons in your agency, you shouldn't have a data center and you shouldn't be developing software. It's just that simple. And so, so for me, I think a lot of the discussion around infrastructure as a service needs to just really move more in the direction of platform as a service and software as a service to begin with. So I think kind of all this stuff, I think where the standards come in is when you have a complex organization, you have to make those platforms and those services work together. And I think where you have to have standards for platform as a service. So today we have plenty of standards for things like, we have RESTful web data standards for moving data, right? I wrote the ones for doing central reservations for hotels and cars, and that's easy, right? But when you start actually talking about, do we have standards for kicking off workflows? Do we have standards for how you, for the message you send to spin up an instance, to spin up a stack, right? Because if I'm buying and implementing tools and I'm going all this trouble to implement all these tools so I can automate just something as simple as provisioning, and every cloud provider has a different set of APIs that I have to call to spin up a stack, then that doesn't work, right? Because then I go into this cloud provider and I have to build a solution for that, then I have to build a solution for that, and then I get locked in, right? And so at some point, where I don't think we want to end up is just moving our data centers into clouds and being locked in for 40 years, because ultimately that won't save us money, right? They'll just create the same problem in a different place.
To jump on that, I think we also, all of us that are really enamored with this new method of working, the idea of continuous delivery and not dropping a release once every 6 to 12 months, right? We're building out that continuous delivery pipeline. And what does that look like? That gets back to standards. I'm not sure that we all have to do it exactly the same, because we do have differences, and we don't want to get to the lowest common denominator with standards, but I ought to be able to take my CD pipeline that I've done with one vendor, and without a whole lot of heavy lifting, because then I have to go tap the modernization fund, I ought to be able to move it to another vendor so that if this vendor chooses to play hardball and wants to charge me an arm and a leg, I'm not locked into 45% maintenance costs instead of the 15 to 20 I'm paying today. That's where standards can help, and we need to walk that fine line, that simple line of standard enough so that it's easy to move between, without, I don't know that I like your standards. I may, but it may not fit my business model, right? We have to have enough customization or configuration of platforms as a service so that it matches the business need. If we forget that we're here to serve a mission and we go hellbound on standards just for standards' sake, we're the idiots that everybody complains about.
So, Joe, you talked about forklift, and certainly that's one way agencies are moving to cloud is forklifting applications. Another way is to move through migration and to create a hybrid cloud, which I know you have as well at ITA and at DHS and also at USDA, hybrid clouds. And so can we talk a little bit about how open standards and open technologies are supporting your ability to do hybrid cloud, whether that be a combination of public and on-premise or a combination of multiple CSPs and different innovative technologies across CSPs?
Well, I would definitely, the hybrid cloud picture just brings additional complexity, and that's the tough part about all of that. All of your support models just get infinitely more complex when you start moving data all around, or data resides in multiple places. To me, that's kind of the most difficult part about it. It's we still think of it as a system, regardless of where the endpoints are. It's an IT system. Again, I go back to the delivery model just changes, the security model changes, the way that you look at it is fundamentally different. So I think the complexity is probably the big driver for me. But I agree in terms of the standards. They have to be simple enough that it has to be a good foundation, but we can't go overboard on standards, because then we get right back to the business model that we're trying to break out of. And so I think being selective about the standards that we do put in place, and being careful about how rigidly we implement them is key.
Well, so I mean, I guess for me, sometimes this gets a little abstract. So let me be very, very specific. So in my organization, we have probably lots of cloud providers I don't know about that people are just using, right? But let's talk about the ones I know about that they're supposed to be using. We have about 7, right? And that includes a mixture of SaaS and IaaS. So let's talk about, we have a vendor one of the few vendors I think out there that has what I call an advanced platform as a service, right? Something where you can, kind of WYSIWYG build workflows and stuff like that. But we don't want to be locked into them forever. So we also have stuff sitting in infrastructure as a service, where we have open source applications, and we have Elasticsearch, right? So I hate to mention vendors, but I want to be need to put realism on it, right? So you have a CRM SaaS, and you have Elasticsearch running in an infrastructure as a service, and then you want to build your public-facing, customer-facing platform for product and service delivery. And you want to build that in an infrastructure as a service kind of environment using open standards to where you don't want every time someone comes in from the outside and logs into your website and downloads a piece of data, right? You don't want to have to pay 5 vendors for the input and output on that file, right? So like I have 1 million customers a month on my website, which is not a lot compared to others, but it's a business-to-business website. If every time one of those 1 million people downloads 3 PDFs, I have to pay I/O charges to 3 different cloud vendors, that's not going to work for me. So what the current standards allow us to do is build the user interface for that in an open source environment, in an open infrastructure as a service provider's environment, and then still be able to use Elasticsearch that's sitting somewhere else, and still be able to leverage my SaaS CRM that's sitting in yet another cloud, and be able to ensure through specific RESTful APIs and through specific standards for how you actually do, and now we're getting really geeky, but the communication between the clouds, right? The actual connections of those clouds to each other, the networking stuff, which is really immature and in some cases can be very proprietary. And if you can't standardize that and make those connections, then what happens is every time that customer clicks, you're having to use their proprietary input and output of each of those cloud providers, and you're into paying I/O charges. So for me, it's one thing, this is what I was trying to say, it's easy to say we have standards, RESTful web services allow us to move data, but it's a different thing to get very specific about the standards that allow this Amazon, I hate to mention, but you have a VPC in Amazon and you're trying to talk to GitHub or you're trying to talk to Azure, or and if the only way you can do that is through like setting up virtual VPN concentrators, that will not scale, right? There has to be a better way to do it. There has to be.
And I think that's where you'll probably hear me make a very rare statement in support of shared services, because now, if 17 different agencies in the Department of Agriculture are trying to make those connections work, right? I'm trying to go to Amazon, I'm trying to go to Azure, I'm trying to go to some other cloud provider that's got a SaaS for me. If I'm doing that by myself, now I have to manage all those details. I've got to manage all those circuits, right? What we're trying to do in ag, and a shout out to a colleague of mine who will be speaking later, right? What Tony and others are trying to do in ag is, let's create that pipe for USDA so that I can consume that. Let's work on those standards, those interconnections, so that I can meet my mission needs and we do it once, or we do it once to each provider, so that, again, I'm not bothered with the details. I don't have to worry about the standards, and there's not 15, 17, 18 different ways of doing it. We each have different costs associated with it, so the vendors pick us apart, no offense, right? That's where a shared service helps us, but it's got to happen, it's got to get accredited, and it's got to be it has to be responded to my business needs. It can't be, well, we'll get you that in 5 years.
Sorry, I bet you the Department of Commerce today is paying probably $250,000 each for 2 TIC connections per bureau within the department. And then if you go strictly by the DHS rule and you start putting a TIC between every single cloud provider, and I have 7 cloud providers, think about the amount of money you're talking about by not bringing it together at the department level. And yet I have federal CIO colleagues who fight that tooth and nail, and it baffles me. But Chad is dead on, right? If we can't share that, the amount of overhead, both dollars and performance overhead, is just crippling. And it is a mission impact, because anytime you take $26 million out of a department budget just to pay for TIC, that's nothing small.
And we're still working on that IT thing, right? If I can consume that shared service, I'll say 2 nice things about shared service. If I can consume that and it adds value, reduces my burden, and gets me out of some business that my administrator does not care about, nobody in crop insurance cares about network connections. They care about that the data moves and that I can say
Right.
I'm insured, right? If we can get out of that business, I'm all for it, as long as it's responsive and meets our mission needs.
And I think that's a huge opportunity. And I think we are having, I know I've been part of some of those discussions with the major vendors and to carry it a step further. We also, if we've got that common connection, we ought to be able to somehow get that consumption billing on that as well, right? So that I can divide that up. If I've got 17 agencies all using that pipe, then I should be able to know or to be able to charge back accordingly. So I think that's one of the models that's evolving, and hopefully we can get there sooner rather than later.
So you've done a great job of uncovering one of the hidden costs of going to cloud. I think a lot of the early movers to cloud, such as yourselves, we were thinking about the value it was going to create, the new capabilities we were going to be able to add to services, and it certainly has turned out it was hidden, now it's not. Now everybody in the room knows about that, but there's certainly other hidden costs as well when we're looking at exit costs, right? And that's part of getting back to the whole idea of open standards and open technologies, ensuring that when you do decide to switch vendors or move a workload or for whatever your new policy change or mission change requires, that you're able to do that with speed and agility. And so I don't know if we've encountered that hidden cost yet, and I was wondering if you can speak a little bit to that in terms of your planning.
A little bit. I mean, I think we're looking more towards the providers that do embrace open standards. We're probably going to screw it up. I mean, this is an immature model. And so, if you believe we're going to get it right 100% of the time, I got a piece of real estate I'd like to sell you. We're not, but we're mindful of it. Unlike what we've done in the past, especially with enterprise license agreements or different license agreements, we all jumped into things like that, and we weren't talking together about it. And so you'd watch, one of the agencies in USDA pay this, and somebody else pay this. I mean, again, it's that divide and conquer. No offense to our industry partners, but that's what has happened. And I know you and I have talked about that kind of thing over time, is this idea of sharing for like things allows us, if we talk standards, now we're thinking about exit strategy. We may not nail it down before we had to jump in to meet our mission, but at least we're thinking about it, maybe we only get nailed 25% of the time. It's a process where we've got to get better, but we're not going to get it right immediately.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, first you have to start with, it's IT. There's hidden costs in everything. It doesn't matter what model you take or go which way you go about it. You're going to uncover costs, and so I think that it's no different. The question is how much and how quickly can you react, right? And I think that's the benefit that we're all looking for, is rather than in the previous model where I would have to extend a contract much longer than I wanted to. It would cost me money to actually maintain that, and then the effort to move away from that. Then I'm not even talking about paying for the new solution and all of the labor costs associated with procuring and implementing the new solution. So I think this is something we've always dealt with in moving from anything. The question is, does this model make that path a little easier? Does it lower our costs in transition? Do we have to maintain it for less than the traditional 3 to 5 years beyond what you planned, right? How do you, what benefits are there? And that for me, I think, is in the new model. The promises now are that it's a little easier in and out, and we'll see if that turns out to be true. I think there is work in terms of standards. Will that help? I think so if we do it right, but we'll see.
I'll share with you guys a secret. I don't know how big a secret it is, but it's not going to be in 2 minutes. One of my favorite things to do is I go to the big vendor events, and I don't use my ITA email or title. And because I'm not a career guy, right? So I sign in as a name, and I just make up a company name, or I use one of my old company names, and I sign in and I go, and I sit in the partner briefings. And I have sat in partner briefings for some of these companies where they have literally talk to their partners about they generate $2 in partner revenue for every dollar in their revenue. They talk to their partners about how people get locked in if you do certain things, right? So I sit in those meetings, and then sometimes I'll go to it because I have that advantage. I go to the senior execs afterwards, and I'm like, so let's talk about this, right? This may sound great to all your partners. So kind of one of the metrics I've taken to following is the amount of revenue, and you can find these metrics, the amount of partner implementation services revenue per dollar of company revenue. I find that to be a very interesting number to follow, because no matter what someone tells you, if it costs $3 per dollar to implement anything as a service, then you've got to believe unwinding that is not going to be easy. I mean, just kind of think through the logic, right? If you're paying $1 million for something and it costs you $2.5 million to implement it, you got to believe that unimplementing it is not going to be a $50,000 affair, right? I mean, and so I just tell you, that's one of the things I really watch very closely is if something takes more than 30 days to implement, to turn on and start using, and if it costs like a lot of money, then my skepticism rate starts to go like sharply up. And if someone's talking about it's going to take 4, 6, 8 months to implement as a service, whether they're talking SaaS or PaaS or whatever, I am totally at that point like looking for exit signs. I don't know whether that really works because, like Chad said, I'm sure we're going to screw this up a few times. But at least for me, that's kind of the model that I'm following. If it takes more than 3 or 4 months to implement, I'm assuming that the exit cost is incredibly high.
It's fair.
Chad?
I have to agree. I've seen companies that behave what I would call evilly, right? and there are some big ones that is their business model. I've heard the same discussions. I like your technique, but I used to work with a company when I was back in shipbuilding, and I'd watch them interact with their customer who put millions of lines of customization into their product. And then the next version of their product included, not all of it, but included valuable pieces of that customization. That's a sustainable customer-focused model. And then I see other companies who you might find 1% reuse across companies, right? You and I talked about this one multiple times. We're not doing a good enough job reusing across the federal lines, but the industry needs to be doing the same things. If you're seeing a good solution in one agency, why isn't that becoming, if you're a product vendor, why isn't that becoming a part of your base product? Like, look, the money train isn't coming from the federal government anymore. And maybe we don't matter in the grand scheme of some of these companies. Maybe we're not the 100% source of revenue here. But if you can't find a way to take what Joe has done in a SaaS environment or a PaaS environment or even a custom built thing and that become a core part of a platform-based product, wow, what an opportunity miss. I mean, I want to partner with companies that think beyond the what's the sale I've got to make or how much money my partner wants to do. I want them that not only help me reach out to somebody like Joe and say, did you know I just built something like that? Can I take 60% of that or 50%? Even if it's 40%, that's 40% of the money I don't have that I don't need to spend, right? If we can't do that ourselves, because God knows federal government people can't talk to each other, that's an unwritten rule, help us out. Our SI partners, if you can point out, I had an SI I worked with, we were doing a cloud strategy, and they had done it for us. And a sister agency in USDA asked them for the same thing. And they rightfully came to me and said, can we use this? I'm like, oh my God, yes, use it, please. In fact, you can bring me in when you talk to them to tell you what it meant for me, right? But it's perfectly legal for that SI to go charge that other government agency the same thing they charged me for that cloud strategy. Perfectly legal, morally repugnant.
So lots of value and upside available in working together in shared services like you were talking about, Chad, with cloud exchanges, and setting up standards even within your organization like you were talking about, Joe, with standards and RESTful APIs and ways of doing things internally. So there is a lot to be gained and shared in terms of best practices. I'm interested in now what's next. What do you have on the horizon? What's the next way you're going to try to push the envelope on open technologies to further what you're doing in your initiatives and your agencies?
Boring from my perspective. I mean, we're just going to keep doing. We've got to get better at what we're doing. And I think that as we do that, things are going to come to our minds, and we're going to need to do things, and that'll further evolve this. What I worry about is that we get into this cycle of talking about it, and it just passes us by. So we've got to actually exercise this, and best way to learn is to do. And so we're going to do that. There are other difficult conversations we have to have around, open standards, and certainly with cloud and the bevy of technologies that are cropping up, the mobile capabilities and all of the things that we are now having to integrate with our mission users, dreaming big about how they do their business differently. So I think that the bulk of what we need to do is keep doing, and then we will react, and this will get better. So that's...
Yeah, for us, I think, for the three big things on my horizon, from a security perspective, HTTPS-based storage access and shutting down SMB, and for the non-geeks in the room, that just means getting rid of your old-fashioned hard drive and the idea of a VPN to get to a shared drive, and replacing it with, basically web or browser-based, even though you may not see it that way, access to your files, is probably the number one thing on our list because it's a personnel security issue for our people overseas. So open standards for web-based storage access, which exist, but we need to implement them, and we need to convince all of the cloud service providers to implement them between clouds. That's going to be one, so we can shut off SMB. I think, too, is I've already started talking to cloud providers about how do we develop and implement RESTful standards for process flows, right? I think we've gotten pretty good at open standards for, RESTful web services for I give you data, you give me data. But if you think about the way most cloud service providers, good ones with solid architectures, are set up, you as an organization change the way the multi-tenant app runs using metadata, right? But today that metadata has to be changed with proprietary code in a proprietary setting. So we've just now kind of come over to the point where we can use HTML5 and JavaScript and create open source front ends for our users that use those RESTful APIs to move data back and forth to those back-end cloud service providers. But what we can't do is actually use that open source front end to change a business process, to change a workflow. So I think for me, after HTTPS storage access between CSPs and with CSPs, I think the next big thing is driving the industry towards standards for actual workflow, for changing workflow metadata with standards-based stuff instead of having to go in a proprietary way to change workflows. I think if I could get those two things done, what that means for us is in terms of our product and service delivery platform, because we're in the middle of this huge transformation to the business side of, we're trying to go from servicing 25,000 companies to serving 350,000 companies. And in order to make that work, we need more agility. So we need these standards for the process flows and workflows in order to kind of get the agility we want. So I would say those are the two biggies for us.
I'd say on our piece, it's really, I like what you were talking about, but the microservices, right? The continued thrust towards microservices and the API economy and the governance of APIs, right? We've come up with governance for investments, governance for data, in various forms, and that's certainly a thrust in our agency. But I am fully on board that if we're thinking about monolithic type things, we're dead. Right, and even in our terms, in a small agency like RMA, monolithic means $5-6 million, right? If I build another $5-6 million application, just shoot me in the head, right? It's not going to work. So we need those 4-month, $500,000 microservices. We've been testing this out in some of our joint work with the Farm Service Agency, and it's working. Now, if I build more and more and more of those things, the theory goes, oh my God, all these interconnections, all this, you're going to kill yourself. That's where we need this governance of APIs, the API economy, to manage that, just like we learned to manage metadata and things like that in the data world. That's the cool stuff. The reality that actually what I'm going to be focusing on with other friends in USDA is I want to blow up FSMA. I want to blow up FSMA because it's not working, right? Not because we are not more secure than 1996, but FedRAMP is failing because it's a compliance exercise. That's one man's opinion, right? We're failing in FedRAMP because then the agency turns around and doesn't use that. And so the security plan approvals within the agencies, when they're consuming another agency's ATO or a FedRAMP JAB approved, I've been burned, and I've been burned purposefully because I chose to innovate. And I actually had some services in the cloud that I had to pull back because the beatings from the IG were too much. And it really, it wasn't a huge cost for me to take that small, non-secure, non-PII service back into my own prem. It was silly. It truly was silly because there's this belief that this piece of paper that says ATO means I'm secure. FedRAMP is based on that premise. FSMA compliance is based on that premise. That's not the intent of the law, but that's what happened. So I love to hear Representative Connolly talk about the intent of FTAR, the intent of FSMA. The reality is we create another group of, I think of a term I can't say, right? Compliance people that all they do is check pieces of paper and hold this and say, I'm secure. We're not secure. We're not even using it for risk-based decision-making, right? The person who signs my ATOs and RMA is a business leader, but I've got to go through 3 or 4 or 5 different hoops along the way for that person to make a risk-based decision. And the paper I give them is not a risk-based decision. It's that we've checked all the boxes. We've got POAMs in place for those things that were found in the third-party scan. It's not a true assessment. You know what a true assessment of my security posture is? Go do an internal pen test. That'll tell you and in fact, it's the only way to tell you whether or not, that's the only real evidential way to tell you whether or not you're secure is actually hack yourself, right? Who's doing that? We're doing that, all right? We've done it in some cases. It wasn't pretty, and we've got a lot. Look, I'm not saying we're the most secure agency in the world. In fact, we've got a lot of work to do, but if it takes us 9 months to stand up the accreditation for a cloud service, we've failed. We have fundamentally failed. I almost got run out of my agency because I brought a DoD planning model to how we do development. 6 months of planning for a 6-month job, right? Half my business cycle, crops are annual, a third to half of my tech cycle, because I think it's less than 5 years. So I'll disagree with Tony. So I think it's less than 5 years. Or he said that was doubling, but I can't do that anymore, right? If you want federal IT to do what it can do and not have 8-inch floppy disks for another 40 years, the security program has to change. We have to change that. It is our biggest roadblock. And in fact, our cloud strategists went around to all the CIOs in USDA and all of their people, number 1 on the list. Biggest impediment. And that's not to say our people are bad, our security people are bad. It's that the process we follow that is designed to protect us from the auditors and the voices on the hill, not to make us secure, is failing us to deliver mission. So I'll jump off my soapbox now.
Well said.
Thank you all so much for sharing your thoughts. I'm gonna, we have a few minutes left. I'm gonna let you close it out with any final remaining thoughts you have on open standards, open technologies, how that's gonna future-proof us in our cloud implementations going forward.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely right. Couldn't, glad he said it, but.
Somebody had to.
Right. Absolutely. It's again, I'll echo that it's just a structural challenge, and I think we all deal with it. So I'll go back to my previous point. Just keep doing, and I think that these conversations will occur. The more that we do, take bite-sized chunks, and just get after it, and I think that we'll all be better for it. The only other theme, and it seems like it's always my theme, is get out, see what else is going on out there. That's almost the entire reason I do these types of events, because I always meet new people and hear about new objectives and make new contacts, and it makes my job so much easier knowing that folks are contributing here. So wherever you sit in the life cycle, in the ecosystem, get involved and stay involved, and we'll all make this thing work.
Yeah, I'll just reiterate that I don't believe anyone in the federal government who doesn't have a blue badge or a weapon in their organization should ever develop software. So I think we need standards for infrastructure as a service, but I think we should all be looking at infrastructure as a service as a legacy environment. I think the future is software as a service and enhanced platforms as a service that let us quickly, via some type of open standard, modify workflows and data and how data is presented, and then continue to innovate. To Chad's point, 75% of my reviews are based on my impact on the business and what I do for the business. 25% of my performance metrics have anything to do with IT, right? And quite frankly, my boss has no idea what any of those mean. So, he cares about what I do for the business.
Right. I would add, one of the things we've got to do as people in positions like we're in, we need to drive the innovation out to the edge. Right, and I was heartened and a little bit disappointed for what I heard this morning. It seems like every time we react to whatever crisis is going on, the desire is for more control. Right, let's have one CIO at the top to rule them all. Well, there's so much going on. Even I have no idea, and nor should I have an idea what's going on at the edge in my own agency. What I need to do is provide that high cover to go after those hard targets of processes that are getting in the way of us delivering value, so that my team can go deliver. My team can go partner with our business users to go deliver value, right? I am not, at a bureau CIO, going to dictate how we go innovate. And there's no way that at a CFO Act agency that people are going to be able to make that happen. There's no way that one federal CIO, no matter how many good ideas come from it. We need people to innovate down at our people's level, right? And so if we're creating structures and laws that force that control to the top, right? The baseline default of government is control and command, right? And so it requires a constant flow of energy from leaders to overcome that default. We're fighting entropy, right? Entropy of government is control. We cannot survive in federal IT if control is the answer. More control is the answer to our problems. It doesn't work. We're in an exponential world, right? The technology, the people, the complexity is all growing. Every couple of years we keep saying, now it's 50 billion things connected to the internet in 2020. 3 years ago it was going to be 20 billion. What's it going to be next year? Right, so we're not even able to predict the level of exponential growth, and to say that one person or two people or a council of people can figure that out is ludicrous. We're not that smart. Humans are not that smart. But if we push that down, individuals at the edge can drive the innovation.
How appropriate to end the conversation on innovation. That's what cloud is all about, right? Not just cost savings, not just standards, but getting that higher value we're all after to improve mission, to improve services, and to provide capability to our constituencies. So thank you all very, very much.